So welcome everybody, and in order to celebrate today for Christians, it's Pentecost. And so we need to explore why it is significant and important. So the word itself, of course, Pentecost, comes from Greek Pentecosta, which really implies 40 days, or sorry, not 40 days, but it implies that there are so many days, 49 days actually, after the last feast, Jewish feast of Passover. So traditionally, of course, it's a harvest festival. If we go way, way, way back in the Jewish tradition, and it is actually the feast of Shavuot, which literally means 7 consecutive days. So it's several weeks. I said days, I actually meant several weeks. And you see the significance immediately of the number 7 coming in. So what is the significance of 7? Now, 7 is universally seen to be some kind of universal geometric rhythmic number, along with 3 and 3 compounds of 3, and so on. There are 7 notes on a piano. There are 7 days of the week, as we know. And then if you decimalize 1/7 as a fraction, then you come up with a certain pattern that gets repeated over and over again, regardless of the fragmentation that you make. So immediately it gives us a clue as to the order and rhythm of the universe, and that has to have some explanation. And so harvest, where you harvest the wheat, actually became a celebration of the giving of laws on Mount Sinai. This is the Jewish tradition. So we have this rhythmic pattern in nature that is associated with laws of nature, that is associated with ethical and moral precepts and laws that come out, that regulate our behavior. Why should we regulate our behavior? Because it's seen that all religion gives us the opportunity for a direction. And the direction, as we understand in the Vedanta, will be toward an understanding or revelation of our own divine nature, and also the divine nature of everything else that manifests itself as law and balance and rhythm. And then, of course, to the Christians, so 7 weeks, 49, and then 49 days, and then the 50th day will be the day after that. That's the celebration. But for Christians, of course, it has a special connotation. And one of the earliest texts that we have is the Acts of the Apostles, purportedly written by the Gospel author Luke, whoever that was. And it is taken historically as a little mythical, because there are things there, biographical things about Paul, the apostle, which contradict Paul's own letters. Just to let you know that Paul really was, in many people's view, the outstanding influence in Western culture. Completely outstanding, completely revolutionary, bringing whole new things and understandings to it. And so what I was saying was the word Pentecost comes from Greek, actually, and indicates a period of time, 7 weeks actually. 7 weeks from the last Christian celebration, Jewish Christian celebration, which was Passover. And we were talking about the significance of the number 7. 7, the 7 notes on a piano, there are 7 days of the week. And then we were pointing out that when you make a fraction of, let's say, 1/7, it comes out as a certain decimal pattern. 2/7 repeats the pattern in different ways, and so on. So some order and rhythm is there present in the universe. And that then gives us a clue about its origin. So just to repeat some of the concepts, you see, what we call the supreme principle has no occupation in space, no parts, and no evolution in time. So how to relate to that? The only thing we can do is to be acute enough to observe the order and rhythm in the universe and the glory that we find there. That gives us then the indication. So just like we won't be able to look into the sun directly, but we can understand the rays that illumine everything. That's a wonderful thing. So originally it was a harvest festival. And then it also became not only a harvest festival, but also an indication, a celebration of laws given to Moses on Mount Sinai. So not only is it indicating the order, rhythm, and so on of the universe, but it's also giving us the moral and ethical laws. Then we have Paul the Apostle, and Paul the Apostle revolutionizes everything. And then we have the Acts, which in some way become a biography of Paul, and we don't take it as seriously as Paul's letters. We take it as a kind of mythological story that has a purpose. But the only thing we know about the Christian version of Pentecost is from the Acts of the Apostles, supposedly by Luke, whoever wrote Luke's Gospel. So, Acts of the Apostles comes up with this understanding. See, when the day of Pentecost came, in other words, there was a celebration already, Jewish festival already there. When that day came, what happened? All the believers were gathered together in one place. That means the apostles, because one place you have feed thousands of people or hundreds of people into one place, a kind of a room. How do we know it's a room? Because suddenly there was a noise from the sky which sounded like a strong wind blowing, and it filled the whole house. So it was a house where they were sitting. So we assume that the original apostles of Ramakrishna, well, I'm saying Ramakrishna because the same pattern we find in the Ramakrishna movement as well. Anyway, a small group of people influenced by one powerful entity. Theologically, we call that powerful entity an incarnation. That's foreign to Jewish thought, because a Messiah is not an incarnation, a divine incarnation. It is simply an anointed one that could be a king. It also could be a priest. In fact, the Dead Sea Scrolls suggest that Messiah is both of these things, a king and a priest. All right, that's fine. So suddenly there was a noise from the sky which sounded like a strong wind blowing, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Now the words used are very interesting. We have this ancient term called ruach. So in the Old Testament we see that ruach is there in many, many ways, and it's very ambiguous. It can mean wind, it can mean spirit, it can mean the breath of God. And we have an equivalent word, prana, because when we study the Upanishads, we'll see that this word prana is used in many contexts, same context actually, that it can be a wind, it can be breath, and it can be also indicating divine presence, a divine entity. So this ambiguity serves us well, because we can imagine that all this rhythm and balance that we're observing has to be infused with a mover, has to be infused with an entity which is giving life and light and love everywhere. Something that's motivating the whole universe. Galaxies spin, your breath is there, you don't make an effort to pump or push up your diaphragm muscle and release it. Some entity is doing it for you very nicely. And we can put this as spirit. So if we translate this as spirit, we'll be well on a useful track to understand what's going on. Some divine creativity enters. All inspiration has a kind of language that says, it came to me, as if it's coming from outside. Now we know it has to come from inside. So the withinness of things comes up. And you may have noticed it in different experiences. Let us say you go and see a beautiful sunrise. Doesn't something inside you jump up? Doesn't some kind of elevation, internal elevation occur? Don't you feel inspired by various things and scenes? Even the life story of a great heroic personality. Don't you feel moved in some way or other? So you can imagine in a house, and at this feast of Pentecost, gathered there for that purpose, harvest festival and celebrating the law. Because that's how it graduated, from harvest festival to celebration of giving of the law. And so they were sitting. Then they saw what looked like tongues of fire. Well, let's go back. So first of all, this wind blowing, audible, this inspiration, collective inspiration gathered together. Now, it's the same kind of inspiration when we are gathered together in a holy place. Let us say it is a temple or a shrine. It can be a church. It can be a mosque. It can be many different places. But because these places are dedicated to a certain purpose, a certain atmosphere is given. We can also say that spirit is filling it. Now we have another word for it, which emphasizes the energetic value. Not just prana, but we actually call it Shakti. That is divine energy. It is the divine energy that is responsible for the entire cosmos. It is the divine energy that is responsible for digesting your food, replacing the cells in the body, giving you pocket money for useless thinking called thought, all of these kinds of things. When we register that, a feeling of thankfulness comes. So observing these things, this rhythm and this glory everywhere, leading us to an attitude of adoration or appreciation, and ultimately leading us to a sense of thankfulness. This process of observation, appreciation, and thankfulness, I call oats. So when I joke, did you have your oats today? That's what I mean. Did you manage to observe the things that you normally bypass? Then did that lead to a sense of appreciation? Then did that make something arise in you which was thankfulness? The next thing that we find is fire. So then they saw what looked like tongues of fire, which spread out and touched each person there. Now, if we look at the scriptural references, we'll see fire is significant. Moses, for example, stands there, and the fire of burning bush occurs. Take off thy shoes, the ground on which you stand is holy ground. When we come into the shrine, we get people to take their shoes off. The ground on which you stand is holy ground. But is it just here? No, it's everywhere. Well, of course, we can't walk around barefoot, many people do. But in your own home, you take your shoes off because what is the home? Is it yours? Or does it belong to the divine that is in some way renting it to you? This idea of prophet, actor, ownership, called ego, has to be done away with. Not done away with in the sense of destroyed, but it has to be revalued as an open channel for divine grace to flow. When this flows, we are infused with spirit. So fire is extremely important. Fire is leading you, and fire is also mentioned in the Upanishads. There's a description of Uma, for example, appearing, the description of, Brahman appearing as a column of fire with no dimensional restrictions, and leading. Now, fire, of course, is one of the elements, as is wind, classically. We think that this is all solid, but it's not. As I pointed out yesterday, Actually, it is all ephemeral waves looking like solid material. But they're not just ordinary waves or material waves. These are manifested waves of divine. These are divine grace flowing everywhere. When we revalue our understanding and look at that differently, then this internal upliftment occurs. And so, tongues of fire. Why tongues? Well, on each person, and it goes on, they were all filled with this Holy Spirit. That's the translation. But actually the term used is Ruach. The same thing. The Lord breathing over the oceans. That's in the Genesis. This Ruach term is used as well. A life-filling thing. And they began to talk in other languages as the Spirit enabled them to speak. So let us analyze that also. Now, when you hear somebody, not me obviously, who speaks well, then you say, he's on fire. All right? He has a fiery disposition. He lights everybody up with enthusiasm. His enthusiasm shines through his face or shines through his eyes and so on. It's a sign of enthusiasm. That is related to this Ruach. It is a sign of the expression of Shakti, this divine energy, that then comes out as an attitude. So first we have the spirit, we can also call it mind, then we have the attitude of the mind. And finally, we have the action. What is the effect of it? The effect of it is, if it is a message of truth, divinely inspired, that can inspire others, it becomes universal. In other words, in this coded language, it becomes a way of transferring knowledge, or transferring not just information, but the truth, and transforming that in this symbolic way. They were all filled with this Holy Spirit and began to talk in other languages. Now, the other languages which are mentioned as they go on are all the languages that are mentioned in the Jewish Old Testament texts. In other words, indicating people of the Middle East of that day. And then, of course, if you want to be literal about it, you have to wonder, there were Jews living in Israel, religious people who had come from every country in the world. Today, we can't avoid people from every country in the world. You go on an airplane and that's it. And with technology, or finger exercise as I call it, we're instantly in contact with people at vast, vast distances throughout the world. We have no choice. We're pushed into each other's company. Well, what is the commonality of it, and why is there dividedness? And the idea that the same entity is going to inspire people in a different way is a unifying principle. It brings us peace. And so we can often see a picture of this Pentecost scene with a dove there, a dove representing peace. Supposing we are all on the same page, but we have different languages, but we all understand the same thing. Different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions, and yet the truth must be the same. If it's profound enough, we will find no divisions whatsoever. So this is a formula for peace. So it comes from a select, chosen people, a message there, which now becomes universal. Now, the original meaning of gospel was the good news that the truth is not just for the chosen people, it is for everyone. So Paul's significant contribution was, I can take this truth to what we call the Gentiles, and without that, there's no universal truth. There's no universal message. The opposite of that is for something to be confined to what we have. Now, there are, most recently, what we are associated with is, relatively speaking, a universal and yet new religious movement. So Ramakrishna, who is entitled, prophet of the age and all of these kinds of things, you can take him as you want. And then how did that movement start and why? And what's the point of it? So Ramakrishna had this embodiment. He was the embodiment of jnana, knowledge. But he was also the embodiment of bhakti, devotion. If you read the Gospel of Ramakrishna or any equivalent, you'll see how easy he can glide across topics and how easy he can cover a whole range from basic worship and dualism to the highest non-dualistic point of view, the final conclusion of the Vedanta, and reconcile with everybody. No contradiction whatsoever. Previously, we could imagine that non-dualists are an exclusive thing, looking down, as it were, on dualistic worshippers. Or we could see the other way around. Even today, you'll find it. And so these various points of view need not be divided. Even in Buddha's time, he's lamented, alas, the Sangha, the order, is divided. And he had many followers from Brahmins and so on who decided that he wants to have a metaphysics. He didn't want metaphysics. Metaphysics is a dividing thing. It's a speculative thing if you only have it in your head. It requires the heart. And Buddha was all about the heart. Jesus' message was a simple one. And we have several contributions toward what we call Gospels. Mark's Gospel historically is deemed to be the earliest. That's what historians would say, those who study these things. But that's not the order in which people read it. And his message is very, very close to Paul's message in his 7 letters. 7 letters, okay, some people may say the 13 letters, but scholars who analyze it will say 7 letters probably that he actually wrote. The others wrote in his style. All of it was adopted. Never mind, they're all useful. But the 7 letters has a certain approach. And the approach was very apocalyptic. Apocalyptic means they were expecting something. Even these gathered small apostles and followers. And Paul never met Jesus, but he states that he is actually the only one who met Jesus the Christ. It wasn't physically. It was a theophany. It was a divine inspiration that impacted him and changed his whole outlook and whole life. And he wanted to spread it. In other words, he had his own Pentecost experience. And that then spread, his enthusiasm spread, and his ideas are adopted. We find it reflected in Mark. But what about those people sitting in Jerusalem who came originally from Galilee? So here's what this text is saying. They were all excited. A large crowd gathered. They were all excited because each one of them heard the believers, that is, these apostles, speaking in his or her own language. And in amazement and wonder, they exclaimed, "These people who are talking like this are Galileans. How is it that and the Galileans had a peculiar kind of Galilean accent, we might say, way of talking. How is it then that all of us hear them speaking in our own native languages, and then the countries are mentioned? We are from Parthia, that means Persia, Media, Elam, Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, from Phrygia, Pamphylia, from Egypt, regions of Libya, near Cyrene. Some of us are from Rome, both Jews and Gentiles converted to Judaism, and some of us are from Crete and Arabia. And I find the mention of Crete very significant, because we know that Swami Vivekananda, on his voyage, had a vivid dream and he had a dream that of a wise old man saying, if you want to learn about the origins of Christianity, dig here. And he was so impacted by this dream, he went up on the deck of the ship. He asked, where are we? Oh, we are so many miles from Crete. And his dream said, if you dig here, you will find. And then the word, which was to do with a philosophical group in Alexandria, Syria, everywhere. Jesus must have known them. And these were called the Therapeutai. And Vivekananda had assumed, or had interpreters, or thought that perhaps this group was a group of Buddhists. When Buddhism went everywhere, it never disturbed the religion. It put Buddhism on the top of what was already there. That's why you find so many varieties. So he thought it may have traced back to Theriputra, that is the southern Buddhists, the sons of the ancient people, the wise ancient ones, a sect of Buddhism, if you will, or a southern school of Buddhist thought. Anyhow, whether that's true or not, that's beside the point. Both Jews and Gentiles, and coming from Crete and Arabia, yet all of us and all of these countries are mentioned in the Jewish text, the Old Testament. Yet all of us hear them speaking in their own languages about the great things that God has done. Amazed and confused, they kept asking each other, what does this mean? We can also ask this philosophical question, what does this mean? Now, should we all be a kind of missionary type of person if we ourselves are enthused with the spirit of the truth, the universal truth that we call Vedanta? Why do we say it's universal? Because just the term itself, vid, to know, to see the truth, unto the finality of it. Philosophically concluded? Not at all. Empirically concluded? Absolutely. And so, and verifiable? Yes, absolutely. That is why when Vivekananda comes to Ramakrishna and says, have you seen God? Ramakrishna laughs a little and says, not only have I seen him, I see him here. He's more real to me than you, than anything here. That was the purport of what he was saying. But then the next statement, very, very significant. You too can also see that, see him. So the opportunity is there for all of us. Missionary endeavor does not begin, and spreading the truth everywhere, does not begin with intellectual maneuvering or gymnastics, filling our head with information, not at all. It begins with a deep, rich, intimate spiritual life that reflects everywhere. Jesus' language, you cannot hide your light under a bushel or a bed. So your light will shine. It'll shine through the face. Bhagavad Gita says that's a distinguishing mark. See? That the very person, the very body, the very face of the person will shine with the truth. That itself will convert people. And what do we mean by conversion? We don't mean persuading somebody to leave a religion and join another one. Not at all. It means an internal conversion, revaluing things that are fleeting, transient, to the depth of what is permanent, to the depth of what is blissful, to the depth of that glory which is within, that inner divinity which is there. That is the meaning. So you'll find many people, many of these ancient sages were called munis, silent ones. You know, there's that English phrase, empty vessels make the most noise. You can bang a dustbin inside, it'll make a lot of noise. When it's full, maybe not so much. So the louder somebody talks, the more disagreements people bring up, the more removed they are from the profound truth, which is found in deep, deep silence. The value of meditation is there. And even when a person goes about their business, that deep silence will go with them. So that that person will be in contrast to many, many busy people. I always remember in one museum, and it was in Paris, and I think it was the Georges Pompidou place there. And in the basement, they were having, a film of a Buddhist monk, and in the background was everybody trying to catch the metro and busy and running and all the rest of it, And this one Buddhist monk gently walking, but you couldn't even see him walking. The movement was so slow, not disturbed at all by any of these things. So this carrying of the spirit with us, where we are connected with truth to the extent that the truth is beyond borders of language and divisions. And everybody understands it. Described here, of course, in the Acts of the Apostles as languages that are being understood by people of varying places within the Middle Eastern regions, including Persia, including Crete, and so on and so forth, all of those things. So this apparent dividedness is all reconciled well in one place. And so carrying this is not a question of words necessarily, because what are the components that contributed to it? Ruach, spirit, breath, or wind. It's ambiguous enough to be interpreted in many different ways. And then the whole idea of fire, which is significant in the Old Testament, fire leading on, and the burning bush that was there, take off thy shoes, the ground on which you stand is holy ground, that kind of understanding. And so fire, to be emblazoned with the Spirit, not just filled with the Spirit, but now emblazoned with a new attitude that really cannot contain itself. It has to go everywhere. And so that it goes in the form of tongues. And that means going beyond the borders of dividedness, where everybody understands, recognizes immediately what is truth. And in your own experience, when you hear something that is truthful, it resonates inside you. And you may examine it and re-examine it and so on and so forth, but it's only an underlying endorsement of the truth that you've already experienced. So these are some of the components. Now in a new movement, missionary movement, we were talking about the power of silence and conversion, not from one religion to another, but internal conversion. And the internal conversion cannot be hidden. And we were just saying how Jesus was saying you cannot hide your light under a bushel or a bed. It shines for everyone, like a lighthouse shines. You don't have to, go and see what the person is saying unnecessarily. Some people are infused with the spirit of speaking. We call them YouTube Swamis in our organization, and that's fine. We have a wonderful YouTube Swami who's coming here to give a retreat at some point this month. And so we can see straight away there's a gift there. But all of us have gifts. The old thing that I ask people to do, particularly children, would you humor me and show me your fingers? What do you find? Do you find ridges there? They're called fingerprints. Yes. Well, before you were born, they were never seen. And when you die, they'll never be seen again. That's a mark of your individuality. There's something you can do, you alone can do, that nobody else can do. This is something I always repeat and emphasize. Those people who listen to me constantly are tired of me saying it. But it's worthwhile repeating it because it means that we are infused with some kind of internal fire that we can share for the benefit of all. When people talk about what is my individual purpose, which comes as a question from this identification, these individual fingerprints, or if you want to be more scientific, DNA, which is unique to everybody. So the next question that comes is, well, what is my individual purpose? What we call in the Bhagavad Gita, Swadharma, your personal individual role in everything. Normally this comes with a joke about the man in the countryside who comes to his friend in the urban center, and they talk, what have you been up to? He says, well, I've just put a jigsaw puzzle together, and it only took me 6 months, and here it is. And his friend says, but it's only 12 pieces. He says, yes, but it only took me 6 months. He says, no, I don't think you understand. It's very easy, 12 pieces. No, I don't think you understand. Look on the box. It says 2 to 4 years. So that's the kind of
Yeah.
that's the kind of human. But we all fit in a jigsaw puzzle. In other words, there's a harmony there. When we talk about Ruach as a spirit, we're talking about something that is introducing us with harmony. Our word for it is prana, and furthermore, we have this additional term which means the same, Shakti, that is the divine in energetic form, energizing the whole universe and creating a sense of harmony. And the harmony numerically in many systems will come out as 7. So we were saying, I'm repeating some of the things that I said earlier, because 7 weeks really from Passover plus 1 day would be this originally harvest feast of Pentecost. Yeah. So Shavuot. Yeah. So these are some thoughts about this important feast today, Pentecost. What's the practical application we have to ask from all of this? So I'm going to repeat a few things. All of us have to be open to what we might call the spirit, divine energy. How do we do that? We have to take the prophet owner agent that we call ego, and we have to make it an open channel for divine grace to flow, rather than a self-centered thing. The key obstacle that we have is selfishness. When we open up our understanding, when that selfish yields to selflessness, then that spirit flows. The result of that spirit flowing will be a fire, an enthusiasm. It may be held inside, but it has to be shared. Don't worry about it. It is a self-sharing, self-evident thing. When Jesus said, come follow me, to fishermen, immediately they dropped the nets and followed him. They didn't even think about it. That's the impact. So what is the impact of our life? My own teacher was a very silent man. I often relay the stories. I can tell it again. So he was the 10th president of the Ramakrishna Math Mission, Ramakrishna Order, elderly man when I first met him, and a very small man of a small physical stature, but a giant spiritual person. And I sat at his feet, and he opened his mouth, and I thought, here it is, my whole life is going to change. And he paused, and I could see he was going to speak, and I waited in anticipation, and he said, so, and I thought, this is it. How do you like the mosquitoes in Kolkata? And it was very difficult to draw him out on any subject. People would sit there for a long time, he wouldn't say a word. And yet they all came away transformed. So it is the same when we visit a church or a temple or any holy place where we can simply sit. I'm not sure who it was. Was it John Vianney or something like that, who saw a person sitting in a church for hours on end, was curious enough to ask him, what are you doing? And he said, I just look at him and he just looks at me. So that is the power of this. And if we are able to take the enthusiasm of a movement and remove the dividedness, how do we do that? We remove dividedness by removing our ego, allowing the grace to flow through. It has its transforming effect. And we are able to transform, and no other species can do it, discord into harmony. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on them all. Thanks.
Om.